Subtracting mixed numbers with regrouping. In this video we're going to look at examples where you're going to need to borrow. That's what it means to regroup. We're going to have to borrow in these examples when we're subtracting mixed numbers. So how do you do it? Well, there's several keys. I suggest, and again, there are various ways of doing this, but I suggest that you set up your problems vertically and not horizontally. You've got to work neatly and look at your answers and make sure they're in simplest form. So I've gone ahead and made a little video here of how to do an example of this. And you can see that these are already written, this example is already written vertically. So the first thing you want to do is bring over the whole numbers. And then you look at your denominators. You're going to actually have to change both of them in this example. So 3/5, the equivalent fraction for 3/5 would be 9/15. The equivalent fraction for 2/3 would be 10/15. Well, you can't take 10/15 from 9/15, so you need to borrow one whole number, which would be 15/15, added to the 9/15, which is already there. That's 24/15. Then you can go ahead and subtract your fractions and subtract your whole numbers. Now, something that's pretty important, especially when you're subtracting fractions and whole numbers. These two examples here are not the same. In this first example, 3/5 minus nothing would just be 3/5, and 4 minus 2 is 2. In the next example, you can't take 2/3 from nothing. You have to put something there. So this is pretty important that you understand that all these equal one whole. 1 over 1 is one whole, 2 over 2, 7 over 7. All 5 of these are equal to 1. So why am I showing you that? Well, it's pretty important when you're subtracting whole numbers and mixed numbers. For example, you can't take 2/3 from nothing. We need to put something here. So we're going to borrow one whole. And what am I going to put there? Well, one whole equals, since this is thirds, I'm going to put 3/3. 3/3 equals one whole. And then you can just subtract 3/3 minus 2/3 is 1/3, and 4 minus 2 is 2. In this next example, again, you can't take 5/8 from nothing. We need to borrow. What am I going to put there? Well, since it's eighths, I'm going to put 8/8, because remember, 8/8 is equal to one whole. And then you can just subtract and get your answer there. In the next example, you can't take 3/7 from nothing. I've got to put something there. So I'm going to borrow one whole. What do I put? Well, since it's sevenths, I'm going to put 7/7. 7/7 is equal to one whole. And then you could just go ahead and subtract there. In the next example, can't take 5/16 from nothing. So I'm going to borrow one whole. And since this is 16ths, I'm going to put 16/16 there. 16/16 is one whole. So this is why I showed you this page. All of those are equal to one whole. So when you're borrowing one whole, depending on what the fraction is that you're subtracting, that's what you would want to put. So this would be 11/16, and that's 2, and 11/16. So you can't take 3/10 from nothing. I'm going to borrow one whole. What would I put there? Well, since it's tenths, I'm going to put 10/10. And 10/10 is equal to one whole. 10/10 minus 3/10 is 7/10. And 4 minus 2 is 2. And one last example. You can't take 2/11 from nothing, so I'm going to borrow one whole. What am I going to put there? Well, since it's 11ths, I'm going to put 11/11. And 11/11 minus 2/11 is 9/11. And 4 minus 2 is 2. Okay. Now here are 5 different types of subtraction questions that you might encounter. Let's take a look at the first one. It's actually the easiest. Can you do 8/9 minus nothing? Yeah, sure, it's just 8/9. And then 12 minus 3 is 9. So that was easy. There was no borrowing necessary on that example. The next one, a common mistake kids will make, they'll say 1/4 minus nothing is 1/4. Well, that's not true. You can't take 1/4 from nothing. We need to put something there. We need to borrow. So we just did a whole page of examples of these. What am I going to put there? Since it's fourths, I'm going to put 4/4, and 4/4 minus 1/4 is 3/4, and 9 minus 5 is 4. Okay, now on these next three examples, we're going to need to regroup on all three of them. The first one, you're not going to have to change either of the denominators because they're both sevenths. In the second example, you're only going to have to change one of the denominators. And in the third example, we're actually going to have to change both denominators. So let's go ahead and solve these. In the first one, first thing I want to do is just put my whole numbers here. Actually, you know what? I don't even need to do that since I don't need to change the denominators. I don't need to rewrite it. So you can't take 6/7 from 5/7. We need to borrow 1/2. Now 1/2 is 7/7. There's already 5/7 there. 7/7 and 5/7. This is now 12/7. And I can go ahead and finish this problem. So 12/7 minus 6/7 is 6/7, and 3 minus 1 is 2. Okay. Now, in this one, I am going to have to change the denominators. So I'm going to bring over the whole number. The least common denominator would be 10. So I don't need to change this one. I only need to change this first fraction into tenths. So this is all about equivalent fractions. 5 times 2 would give you 10. So we got to do the top times 2. 2/10 is equal to 1/5. Now we got a problem because you can't take 7/10 from 2/10. We're going to need to borrow. We're going to borrow 1/2. So we have 16 wholes left. Now, how many tenths is 1/2? 1/2 is equal to 10/10. There's already 2/10 there. 10/10 and 2/10 is 12/10. You know, really what you can do, you're just adding the numerator and denominator here to get your 12/10. And then we can just finish the problem. So 12/10 minus 7/10 is 5/10. And 16 minus 7 is 9. All right, let's look at our last example. We're going to need to change both denominators. First thing I want to do is bring over both whole numbers. And the least common denominator would be 10. We're going to change these both into tenths. Well, 1/2 is easy. That's 5/10. And the reason it's 5/10 is 2 times 5 is 10. So we do the top times 5. That's 5/10. How many tenths would be 4/5? Well, 5 times 2 gives you 10. You do the top times 2. That would be 8/10. Now we've got a problem. You can't take 8/10 from 5/10. We need to borrow. We need to borrow 1/2. So there's 12 wholes left. Well, 1/2 is equal to 10/10. There's already 5/10 there. If you add 10/10 and 5/10, it's 15/10. Remember, you can just add these two numbers, 5 plus 10. This is now 15/10. So 15/10 minus 8/10 is 7/10, and we subtract our whole numbers, and 12 minus 7 is 5. So that is how you subtract mixed numbers with regrouping.